Good morning, everybody. You're very welcome. My name is Joyce Fitzpatrick, and this is the final program in this series called Flourishing. I have been very kindly asked by Engaging Dementia to come up with this series once a month, and it's been going since March the 2nd this year. All of these sessions are available through Engaging Dementia, and to start today, I would like to just have a little synopsis, a brief look at what was covered in the different weeks. I'm a nature-based therapist, and I have been working with people who live within nursing homes over the last 16 years. And my mother lived with Alzheimer's disease for 17 years. So over that time, I have really been focusing quite a lot on what it is to flourish, to keep one's life going in the best possible way over the years. The basis for a lot of the activities is there are two areas that I'm really focused on. One is nature, just the presence of nature all about us and the power of it within our lives to flourish. And the second area is music. So these both come up through these ideas come up through the themes over the series. So back on the 2nd of March, we started with restoration and renewal, acknowledging where people were after the pandemic, in many places feeling really quite isolated, quite confused, almost you could say neglected. Hadn't seen their family, hadn't been involved in activities. In fact, a lot of people, older people, hadn't had any physical exercise or any fresh air, some of them for weeks on end. At this time, the World Health Organization came out to say that being isolated in one's room without activities over a period of time could be just as damaging as COVID itself. So it was a sorry time for many people. So I started off with the theme of the Dawn Chorus, because I was very lucky during the pandemic, the 2 summers that we've gone through, to be able to be outdoors all day long with older people. We started the day with the Dawn Chorus. We had it on our Bluetooth speaker outdoors, just in case anybody couldn't hear the actual Dawn Chorus. That's the birds waking up in the morning, particularly noisy in summertime at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So this was a great start to the day, and it was like an anthem of hope for the day and for the week ahead. During that time, we also had a lot of exercise outside and meeting with people, connecting with different people and connecting again with some of the activities that had been done up to that time. I provided a list of different tactics at that session for providing people's mental health, as well as looking at very specific crafts and activities. That was the very first one. The second one in April was about sowing seeds of hope and happiness daily. And this was about the constant need to keep going forward, to take what we know about a person, very important that we know all about them, what they like, what they don't like, their patterns of living, etc., and that we continuously sow the seeds of happiness. So every day we focus from early in the morning on happiness in every way that we can for an individual. A person will flourish if great attention is paid to how they are. If a person who's looking after them is sensitive to their changing moods, their changing humors, their changing appetite, all of that kind of thing. So this was focusing on planning and preparation, really. And this is where the team comes in, where people work together and say, I'm not feeling really great today. Can you look after Mary? this morning because, you know, she can be really quite chatty in the morning, and I wouldn't be up for that. Where team can share and can plan the activities in the day. If this happens, the residents are informed about things that they can look forward to in the day, and that might help them to make choices about what they wear, for example, or about their visitors coming, or particular hairstyle or makeup or whatever. So that's planning. The idea of planning specific activities, of course, has got many, many benefits. And I'll be going into this later on this morning, the benefits of nature-based activities in particular to boost autonomy and confidence, to boost morale. Very, very important. Certain activities work much better than other activities. And of course, it's the doing rather than the end product as well. So in planning the activities, very important to understand what is the most that a person can have from this activity. And if it's a very successful, maybe the activity can be drawn out over several days or weeks, put away and brought out again and again. This I find really, really works very, very well. The next, in May, we talked about inner calm and resolution, because of course in the summertime you have the possibility of sitting out in daylight, and we covered all the biological and psychological benefits of being outdoors. The serotonin and the dopamine, the reduction in the amount of cortisol in the body and other stress hormones, just the benefits of being out and having the sun shining on you. I covered potential designs for the garden, and some flowers and some vegetables and all of that, dementia-friendly gardening. The next one we looked at in June, we looked at biodiversity for reminiscence and activities. Biodiversity, of course, is a great subject nowadays. It's saying that for our well-being, we need every creature out there. We need the bugs, the bees, the flies, the wasps. We need, and this is a very interesting conversation with many older people. They want to say, well, what's the point of a wasp, you know? And of course, when we go into these things, we realize that there's a place for everybody, every creature, and also every person. And a lot of the research has pointed to the fact that having relationships with living things increases our compassion and helps us to be more resilient in ourselves. So we're closer to other people, but we're also more tolerant of our own shortcomings through paying attention to nature. It's amazing how that happens. In July, we looked at challenges. And we looked to the birds and bees for this one, and the butterflies. And this was very interesting. I think a lot of people enjoyed it very much. The bees, as we know, have been very challenged in our environment, in our world in the last few years. And they have so many strategies, you know, to do well, as have all the other insects and the butterflies. They might look fragile, but in fact, they have great resources and great strengths. So we said, how can we look at the challenges we have in older care, for example, responsive behaviors? We said, how can we deal with it? How can we compare what we do with these living creatures? That was very, very interesting. How can we work together as a team? How can we have common goals? How can we use validation and encouragement and different forms of communication and preemptive planning? That was a good one. We also looked at the water, the great benefit of water. And that was an interesting program. Where water is the great solvent and the great healer. That's right. We didn't have one in August. So in September, feeding the soul by nourishing the earth. This was comparing our lives to the lives of, for example, large trees, how a large tree can flourish and do really, really well because it's being supported by the root system and of course, all the fungal hyphae in the soil that are all joining up and bringing sugars, carbohydrates, and water to the root hairs. We thought about that as how a person needs a great, I suppose, community around them. Some people, for example, some members of their family can support them in certain ways. Maybe neighbors who drop in can, lift people up by memories of garden parties or whatever it is, and this can help to build a person up and give them restore their confidence. Really, the seasons in the year are tied in with life events very often. So when we look at the leaves changing and falling in autumn, it can very often be a metaphor for life, time moving on, as the quiet time of winter can be a time of reflection. And of course, spring can bring a lot of hope. So we covered that. And with all of these, the music and the references, the resources covered as we went through. Just last month, we looked at finding delight and awe in the mundane. This is one of my favorite ones because you can bring stillness and calm into your nursing home or into the home of your person who's living with the dementia in so many different ways, in ordinary, everyday things. You know, I know one carer and she has a bag of Tayto. When she calls on this lady, we call her Miss O'Brien, a bag of Tayto, but she gets about a half an hour pleasure with the woman over the bag of Tayto. You know, they just lick their fingers and say, oh, aren't we very bold? You know, here we are just sitting here eating crisps. And this is wonderful because it warms up the relationship, gives the client a chance to say, this person is a friend. They come regularly. I feel really at home with them. It brings stillness to a person, a very ordinary activity, you know, and life is full of ordinary activities, as we know. So it brings us much delight as trotting around the globe to sit there and look at a few photographs once you're looking at them with another person and sharing them with another person or with a dog maybe, or a pet of some kind. So anyway, that's where I've been over the last series, and I know these series are available from Engaging Activities, as are some of the tips and the prompts and the list of resources that are available. Now I want to share the screen to say, well, where are we going today to wrap up? Because today has an interesting title, Wooden Love Tokens, Memories and Trees. And I just want to explain why you'll see now when we share the screen. So I'm going to share the screen with you now. This little session today is really about it's about savoring, I suppose, savoring relationships and memories. And what I'm thinking about is that over the years, people have known that trees are very important. Trees have been there for us for such a long time. But when you think about it, not only have they provided us with a wonderful landscape, with shelter, with oxygen, with everything we could ever need in terms of shade and shelter and a place to live, and a place for birds to live and animals and insects. You know, the trees that we have around us are the dinosaurs of the earth, really. They're there for us, and they're very sensitive. They're very much kind of talking to us over the years, and we now realize that. We realize that they communicate with one another. So I just thought that trees deserved to be brought into the front of this series about flourishing. If you just look at these trees in the picture, how they flourished, how they've decided, where to throw out their branches to get the maximum sunlight, how the secondary thickening has worked on the bark, and you have these gnarled, strong, coatings around the tree. And you can see how the roots are spreading out, out from the tree. And we know the roots will spread a distance much, much larger than the tree, maybe up to 3 times larger and wider than the tree. Not to mention the root hairs that are connected in with the mycelia. We now know that the fungal threads under the ground go on for miles and miles and miles. It's just like a world wide web, So trees have not just been there, but they have been in our psyche. They have been since earliest time on this earth, the place where people went for security, for comfort, for shelter, for spiritual sacrifices and rituals of all sorts. They've just been everything for us. And of course, bark and wood has, given us everything else: our homes, our boats, our caravans, our floorboards, and our cradles for our children, and of course, our coffins when we die. The wood has provided so much for us. Of course, trees have provided so many leaves and flowers and fruits all over the world. They're just absolutely fantastic. So I'm focusing on the trees. Now, the goal of this Flourishing series is just a reminder so that we can assist people to live and thrive and prosper. This can only happen if we're well informed, supported, and compassionate. And I have found in my work over the last number of years that nature brings compassion up in the human soul more than anything else. And this was also shared by Oliver Sacks. There's a number of things here. I have nature builds compassion, it restores, replenishes. It brings presence, the feeling of belonging. It brings joy and delight. It accepts us exactly how we are and makes us look and listen, etc., and etc. So the content of all the sessions that have been happening provides the latest research in the area, hands-on tried and tested activities, plenty of real-life situations and laughs, and in some cases, some very poignant situations and some sad situations, but also solutions for responsive behaviors. All right, now, what then? What then? So nature is all about us, we know that. And what I want to introduce you to is the idea that there is a thing called nature-based therapy that's behind all of this. I'm a nature-based therapist. And this is actually what's happening. This is looking inside the engine of the Flourishing series. What has actually been going on is, and then we'll move on to the love tokens and all of that. What's been happening is that with nature-based therapy, we focus on 5 areas: the physical, social, psychological, cognitive, and spiritual aspects of a person. And nature is applied to the different areas. So, for example, just take one there. Say your resident is very interested in being physically stronger. Well, there are many, 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 many nature solutions where you can improve their relaxation, their awareness, self-regulation, person's flexibility, core strength, eye-to-hand, coordination. There's ways that people can improve their lung capacity, their heart, their blood pressure. they're everything. I mean, there's just so many ways in nature that the knock-on effect will be of a physical nature. Of course, social collaboration. We now know the social prescribing has taken off all over the world, and it's really taking root here in Ireland at the moment. The provision of non-medical, non-psychological interventions, social collaboration. Everyone is talking about art therapy. They're talking about drama, they're talking about all the ways where people with dementia can get stronger through social connections, being a part of a flower arranging team or a tea party or signing a petition for something, or something happening in the world. Social collaboration. It's a huge area for nature-based therapy. So in my work over the years, I've seen people really flourish by growing even a pot of flowers together, lasagna planting we're doing at the moment, all the bulbs, or deciding together that they want to have lawn instead of cement in their activity area. The power of people working together, social collaboration, the fun of it, people singing together, people working together and contributing. Very important, nature-based therapy. The psychological, of course, we have given lists of psychological benefits over the series. Increased quality of life, self-esteem, improved mood, decreased anxiety, to alleviate depression, etc. All the psychological benefits of nature-based therapy, the building of resilience within a person and motivation through doing particular activities. Now, I'll give you an example of that one. Resilience, for example. Very often we have plants indoor and outdoor, and they might be suffering with the pest, or they might be dehydrated. And we talk to our residents about this. And we don't come up with solutions immediately. We ask questions. We say, I wonder what's happening here. Or we look at the dog who visits, and we think the dog is a bit down in the mouth. Why would the dog be like that? And the person comes around to the idea, maybe the dog needs more encouragement or better food or something, for their psychological improvement. Now, more than any other area, the cognitive area is really well understood in relation to people living with a dementia, since we're looking at cognitive decline or cognitive improvement in some cases, when a person gets a little bit better, or it takes part in an area of activity that requires responsibility. The cognitive improvements are enormous for people through nature-based therapy. And of course, Oliver Sacks is the man, the American neurophysician, who said, I have in my experience noticed that gardening is the one thing that seems to reorganize the brain. He said, I can't explain why this is or how this is, but I've seen it. And it seems to can be better than any medication. Cognitive skills improved through hands-on activities that involve nature. So that could be feathers, cones, leaves, herbs, flowers, whatever. It can be anything, animals and plants. Of course, the spiritual are the ones that it's more difficult for us to understand and to tie down the spiritual benefits. But if a person is flourishing, it's very clear that their spirit is free and they're, relaxed in themselves. They're connected. They have an inner kind of a smile. It's wonderful to see that. Really. It's just fantastic. So they're the 5 areas, and that's just looking under the bonnet of what's happening with nature-based therapy that allows for the flourishing to work so well. So this is all great, but each one of us still wakes up in the morning, you, me, and everybody else, with our own thoughts. Oh, how am I feeling? Did I get enough food? Who is that person? Now, if we have many, many thoughts, you can imagine a person living with dementia who's confused will have many, many thoughts. And we know this, negative thoughts coming. This can block happiness, and it does. You know, we tend to worry about tomorrow and yesterday, and we tend to not live in the present moment and in happiness. Now, people who are living with the dementia sometimes teach us about living in the present moment when we see how much fun they get out of something. I used to bring my mother to Herbert Park in her wheelchair, and when she saw the lake and the ducks swimming on the lake, oh, she was just at her absolute complete happiness. And that made me sit with her and sit still and forget about all those things we think about that go through our head. So this is one area that is very interesting to people living with the dementia and their relatives. I was giving a talk the other night, and I was focusing on this area. Being involved in a creative activity can be just amazing. You know, any kind of an activity can be better than no activity, but an activity that has a hands-on element can be absolutely brilliant for bringing happiness and improving the cognitive ability of somebody living with the dementia. As a matter of fact, there's so many things that are happening when we are in the middle of the doing that it's worth looking at. So we know that trees are our greatest friends, and we know that memories are connected. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and come back to show you a couple of things that I have here in my room. Now, what we're doing is we're focusing on this particular session on things that are just like the cherry on the cake, okay? We know over the series how to select activities that are good for making a person feel engaged and needed and wanted and all of that. We understand how, through the Jackie Poole system, looking at the different levels of dementia that a person might be passing through and how to change the activities. We've looked at many, many, many ideas about crafts, you know, but here I just want to return to one thing to do with crafts and hands-on activities to do with wood. So I have here a pair of butter pats, and I noticed that when I bring these into a session, whether they were living on a farm or maybe they saw these butter pats through their grandmother or whatever, but almost everybody will know what these are for. And people start moving and, you know, saying, this is how you did it. And, oh, that reminds me about churning the butter. And now I'm thinking of my grand aunt down in Tipperary, and wooden object has had a huge effect on reminiscence. Really, really brilliant. All of a sudden, we're back. We're remembering something that maybe is part of a previous time. Here we have a spoon from, I always say this is from the famine days in Ireland, which is a bit of a cheat. I'm sure it's a copy of a soup spoon from the famine days. So people love holding wooden objects and feeling them, and bowls and everything. Sometimes we come up with these. We have a lot of handcrafted objects from different parts of the world. And again, these are full of soul, I suppose you could say, these hand carvings, be they animals or humans or objects. They're fantastic. You know, you could look at them for a long, long time and wonder who carved them and what are they saying, and who are they, and oh, just so much, they're so rich. Now, very often these will find themselves in a charity shop, and they might be made of ebony or mahogany, but you can pick them up for an incredibly low amount of money sometimes. These are definitely worth having as objects for a reminiscence and appreciation. Now, we have other things, these kind of odd things. And I think this is some kind of a pipe with the dream catcher theme to it, little feathers. This can cause a lot of conversation. People say, well, what is it? And you could bring it into a social evening, a happy hour, and have great conversation, great laughter. As a matter of fact, we use this type of object very often in a place I was working there a couple of years ago, where people had to come up with the most outlandish stories, and then there was a prize. So residents were saying, oh, I got this from my uncle who was a bishop. It's fantastic. Okay, there are a lot of wooden objects that we use, like back scratchers and these things for massaging our feet, which are very much everyday objects. And I would recommend having wooden objects around us as much as possible. Wooden lamp bases and wooden spoons and all sorts of things, because we're moving still into plastic. It's really quite shocking that even after all the talk, people are still throwing out old things and bringing in new. This is a wonderful little thing. For a long time, I got this from my grandmother, paint on it, and I didn't know what it was, and I very often bring it in. It's actually a needle holder. You unscrew this, and needles are stored inside the handle. So it's very handy for sewing, and it's a lovely object. Of course, wooden objects can be polished and waxed and varnished or whatever too. Now I'm getting to the wooden spoons. This is a very familiar object to many people. They know this is a Welsh love spoon, it's called, where the two sides are intertwined. And we had a look at these at a previous show, and we painted some wooden spoons with all sorts of things, and we wrote things on them, and it was very interesting. And that's where we're at here today. I have something to read for you here. Long before commercially produced Valentine cards were introduced, there were many love tokens that were mysteriously sent between sweethearts, treasured by life by the person. In a monetary sense, these things were worth very little, but sentimentally, they were worth an enormous amount. They were heavy with meaning. Some of them had messages entwined in them. This, for example, could be a proposal. Why don't you and I get together? In other cases, there were two spoons sharing a platform. I will work for you in return for your loving heart. Very often keys were carved, or even keys were carved into the spoons, because a spoon was a very, very interesting thing to give another person. Now, if we look at Irish lace, and indeed we look into snuff boxes, cigar boxes, and everything, we will see a whole lot of these, and we can look at them online. And these are objects that are full of soul. They come from a tree. We could ask, well, what tree does that come from? Or what combination of trees do we have here? And you can just, it just stirs your imagination so much to have a wooden object. The point is that the making of these objects, if you think about it, what did people do? They didn't spend all day making these, because of course they had to get on with earning a living and gathering wood for the fire. If we go back hundreds of years, and there was hunting to be done. There was skinning of animals to be done. There was all sorts of jobs. So these love tokens were very often made by candlelight at the end of the day. And they were very, very special. It was very important that they were made in a certain way and that they were perfect. So they were very often passed down through generations. Now, this is what I'm getting to here with wooden love tokens. I'm getting to the idea of something that is more than sentimentality, but it's nostalgia. Nostalgia, a happy, happy feeling about previous days. And I believe that people flourish when they can have a happy feeling about their own previous days, their own youth, whatever about the ups and downs, that there are certain things that they can focus on that were happy memories. And from this, I will tell you that one of the first things I will do in a nature-based session is I will say, please tell me, what is your earliest memory of nature? And this is really behind flourishing. I'm sitting there, I've got time, I'm asking you, go back, tell me, what cheered you up when you were young? What do you remember? And it's a fantastic question to ask anybody and to keep going back to again and again.